Well, Richard, it's fantastic to sit down at the end of day 2 at NAB. How's the show been for you so far?
You know, this is my first NAB show, actually. So it's been really nice to just sort of see the different sort of a vibe around us. Today's actually been kind of busy, so it's nice to see a lot of people coming out again.
Yeah, lots of great traffic, and yeah, the reason Richard and I wanted to sit down was really reflect on some of our recent conversations around Accedo sports strategy.
Yeah, it seems to be a common theme these days, especially in this show, right? Have you seen that in some of the companies that are here and some of the presentations?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there's been a lot of recent announcements in the sports world, specifically with the experiments and both successful and failed experiments the RSNs have been taking. But you've also had Endeavor now acquire WWE. So the excitement levels in the sports world, and specifically the digital sports world, never ceases to amaze us.
You know what, the Endeavor acquisition, right, of WWE, I'm wondering where you think that might lead. Is it an exception, or do you think it might also be a signal of other mergers and acquisitions that might occur in the industry, and why?
Yeah, I mean, my perspective is it's really just a continuation of the M&A streak we've seen in the industry for a long period of time. I think you know, you've seen a trend of more sports consortiums forming and really sort of focusing on different sports to sort of create a diversification on their business models. Yeah, I mean, in Endeavor's case, you're essentially talking about you know, sports entertainment meeting the MMA world, and perhaps you'll even start to see a bit of a crossover in their content model. And you've already started to see stars crossover between those organizations in the past, and perhaps that's also a little bit behind the strategy. So I think one of the really exciting things that has been happening with Accedo is we're certainly seeing more and more sports organizations wanting to actually experiment with extended reality. You know, with our recent acquisition of iCandy Lab, obviously we have more capabilities in this arena, and you know, we're starting to see experiments both with augmented reality and virtual reality. As one of our creative leaders at Accedo, what are some of the use cases that, you know, resonate with you, and you know, are there any hot takes you would make when it comes to XR and the sports industry?
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of an exciting area, and what I think really excites me is getting our TV viewers on the couch into the arena, right? So, I mean, that might mean something you know, as straightforward as the camera at the net on the tennis court. So you're getting right a courtside view of the play, and it can extend to things like helmet cams, where you're in the driver's seat of the F1. So bring the couch right into the race car, right? So that's kind of an exciting factor. It's more sort of visceral. It could also mean bringing the pitch or the Tour de France course onto your coffee table, right? So that's a bit more of the augmented reality. So those are a couple of the back and forth that I think excites me probably the most.
Yeah, I mean, those use cases, again, absolutely resonate with me as a fan. And I think, you know, fundamentally, over the last 10, 15 years, you know, when it comes to traditional viewing devices in OTT, Accedo has sort of been a leader when it comes to, you know, defining a common UX paradigm where possible, in order to, you know, make UX UI intuitive for the user and have the content shine. And I think in extended reality, there's a very similar challenge for the industry. We are predicting a large range of, you know, VR devices to be in consumers' hands over the next few years. There hasn't been a real standard set for UX paradigm, and I think this is another area that we again can establish as a leader. We certainly want to make a bit of a ubiquitous you know, viewing behavior for both AR and VR, and then, you know, do what we do best, which is really provide moments of delight and really sort of extract the use cases that are very sports specific or franchise specific or athlete specific, that again just gives that moment of delight to the user.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of greenfield, right? A lot of areas for interesting development. Just from your perspective, you know, you meet a lot of our OEMs, a lot of are also content owners, right? Are there certain themes that you're seeing with respect to sports? Either it could be things that they're trying to do or things that are preventing them from doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the basic challenge is just getting the different content providers on board with experimentation, right? Most of the OEM providers within extended reality have taken great strides in sort of improving the overall experience. Everything from less intrusive devices to more ease of setup of those devices. But I think where the challenge is right now is just convincing content providers to invest and experiment. We're happily starting to see some of the tier one media and entertainment providers starting to do more and more experiments. And I think if that trend continues, then essentially the OEMs will back even bigger investments into improving their platforms, making it less intrusive. And eventually, it will come down to a real sort of mix of motivation, both from the OEM side and the content provider side, and also vendors like us, who are willing to sort of put a front foot forward and say, look, we're willing to invest with the community overall. So one of Accedo's strategic focuses at NAB 2023 has been around the innovations we're bringing to our sports portfolio. In particular, we've showcased some of the really exciting use cases possible through augmented reality and virtual reality. We've also shown some advancements in some of the sports UX possible with our native frameworks on more traditional viewing devices. In terms of sort of general trend and sort of the chatter that's been happening at NAB, what are your thoughts about some of the other innovations that are going to be coming into the digital sports world, specifically on the UX side? Obviously, with your product design background, there's probably been a few things that you've been keeping a closer eye than myself.
Yeah. I mean, it's great to sort of showcase some of what we're thinking and sort of translating that right into some demonstrations of what that could be. But I think what I'm seeing is that a lot of companies are starting to do great things around sports, right? And a lot of it has to do around sports being a much more, maybe an interactive viewing state than, say, for a TV show or a movie, right? You tend to lean in a little bit more. And the most obvious one, and we are starting to see more and more of that, is the use of all that great data that exists now, that real-time play-by-play data, right? So it's not just at the beginning of the match where you can see the lineup and their stats, but even on a given play, what is that player's success rate or fail rate, right? In very contextual, almost real time. It also lets us create great menus where we see all the matches that are being played right now, but it's not just the name and the teams, it also has the score and the elapsed time. Or even some go so far as to indicate whether it's overtime or a highly interesting moment, right? So some of these things that are sort of uniquely interesting to sports are starting to make it into the interfaces. And beyond that, I mean, a lot of the big companies are introducing watch parties where you can watch together, right? But when you think about what is the best use case for a watch together, it's appointment TV, and that's the definition of sports and news to some extent. So that's another area where I think it's a really good use case for using that feature just for sports. And finally, with watch party, that comes along with chat, right? And just that more sort of interactive thing. But if I could go just a bit further, it's that what we're trying to do at Accedo and what we see a few others do is find ways where we can not just duplicate the TV screen onto the mobile, but let them work in tandem and complement one another, so we can still have a lean back experience on the TV. Just put it on, and maybe you have others in the room watching that same thing. But if you want to dive in and see the stats or change angles and camera views, put that on your mobile phone, where it's much more interactive, tactile, and personal. So, I mean, those are some of the things that I'm kind of exciting to see. We're seeing glimpses of it in some of the more agile direct-to-consumer brands. but I'd really love to see it sort of build out into a more generalized approach to sports as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, many of the things you're saying resonate with me personally as a big sports fan. And another thing I've been picking up at NAB is just the idea of more hyper-personalized viewing experiences. In sports, of course, but across every type of content vertical. But I think specifically for the sports fan, they are very sort of preferential in terms of their viewing behavior. They like certain sports. Some people like to tune in for the full game. Some people like to tune in for just the last couple of exciting minutes. So I think the more personalized the service can really lead to further user engagement, and that's going to be I think important trend to follow in the industry for the next few years. And back to what you said about contextual statistics, I think that area in particular is very exciting. With the real estate, whether it's a lean back platform or lean in platform, the ability to actually have a user generate statistical information that's relevant to them in the moment they're viewing content, that's a very, very powerful way to really engage them and keep your service sticky. So for me, again, as a fan, that's a trend I hope materializes in more and more innovations.
I think you're really right. It's that contextualization that really is the key, right? That's what sort of makes it golden. Just to build on one thing that you said, a lot the hyper-personalization, and maybe this applies to you as well, but one of the things that a couple of our partners have done, and I really like, is to not view this sort of personalization as a very Cartesian choice of, what sports do you like, within it, what leagues, and then what teams. Where there's a lot of room for also focusing on an individual athlete that's in the news, the Cinderella story, right? The golfer that's having an amazing run, or the tennis player that's arrived on the scene and is just smashing it. And that's a great way to bring in a non-traditional fan that maybe doesn't follow that sport intently, but picks up on the specialness of that, the LeBron and his record breaking. You pick up on a story. How do you bring that into a sports viewing, right? So personalization, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, is sometimes also very about an individual, about a personality. Like, do you have some certain individual athletes that you will try and catch their games?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, in my case, someone like Rafael Nadal, if there was more contextual statistics, content related to him as a player within the tennis world, that would be something I would certainly be drawn to. And I think sort of the celebrity in sports is being sort of monetized further and further and further. When you sort of think about some of the content that Netflix has launched, whether that's Full Swing or Breakpoint, clearly, they're trying to drive audience engagement for folks who may have not necessarily been drawn to that sports, but once they start sort of seeing the behind the scenes and the athlete engagement and what it takes to actually train and be successful at their craft, suddenly you're unlocking a whole bunch of new viewership. So that's definitely another exciting area to sort of follow. And I think, kind of building upon that, once these audiences actually discover these athletes or sports or different sports franchises, the ability to then draw them back into the digital service that's monetized and that they will subscribe to will be another sort of industry problem or industry challenge to solve. I mean, you don't want their sort of engagement to stop at that documentary or that series. You now want to obviously drive more long-term stickiness in terms of your core proposition, which is live sports.